We were looking at how do you run a regression in Stata, where we looked at first how do you run a regression with one independent variable and how you can run it with more than one independent variable. We want to look at that given that you've already done a regression, how do you predict residuals and the y-hat values from that regression? So let's say we want to generate the residuals from the regression. Also, we were looking at this auto data set in Stata. So let's just use this again. So we want to now generate residuals from the regression of price on MPG and weight. So what we'll do is we'll use first the regress command and make sure that we run the regression. If you've already run, then you don't have to run this again. Like we already did run it in the for part one, but because we're looking at part two now, so let's just run it again over here. Regress. So first we write a dependent variable price, then we write our independent variables MPG weight. So that's the syntax. So we run our and we make sure we have run the regression from which you want to generate the residuals. So now what we'll do is we'll use predict with the reset option. Remember, option is always after the comma, right? So here, so reset is a short for residuals. You can write the full residuals here, just write reset over here, right? And over here is the name that it will give the variable that will contain your residuals. So what this command is telling Stata to create a variable named residuals for the most recent regression. In this case, the most recent regression is this, so it's going to generate variables for this regression. So it's a post regression command, right? Once you run the regression, then you will predict the residuals. So now, if you notice over here, it has created a new variable known as residuals and also given it a variable label on itself, by itself, right? We can also verify some OLS properties of the residuals. We can check that we know one of the OLS properties is the mean of residuals is 0 if intercept is included. We can see it's very close to 0 over here. The another OLS property is the residuals are uncorrelated with each explanatory variable or independent variable, right? Because and by uncorrelated you mean the correlation is going to be 0. So over here what we're doing is we're just using the core command for this, which I looked in an early video, and we're doing core residuals, right? So basically we're saying that find all pairwise correlations between residuals, MPG, and weight. This will return us our correlation matrix. So details on this are in another video. So as we can see over here, the correlation between residuals and MPG is 0, and so is the correlation between residuals and weight. It's very, very close to 0. Right, so this is how we can predict residuals from our regression. What if we want to predict the y-hat values from our regression? So example, we're going to use the same example that we regress price on MPG and weight. And you want to determine the predicted y values from the regression of price on MPG and weight. So here we're going to use predict with XP option. To generate residuals, use predict with reset option. To predict y-hat values, use predict with XP option. What this is going to do is, this is going to create a variable known as y-hat that has the y values predicted again from our most recent regression, which was like we did not have to run the regression again because we did run it once when you were generating the residuals, and since we wanted the y-hat values from the same regression, so you do not have to run it again, right? You only have to run it again if you want to work with a different regression. Once you run a regression, then you can then whenever you use predict with reset to generate residuals or predict with XP to generate y-hat values, Stata will do it for the most recent regression. Since you wanted to work with the same regression that we worked with for residuals, we did not run it again. And here we can see Stata has created a value y-hat and it has given it a label also linear prediction. We can also verify OLS properties for fitted values, as one of the properties is that fitted values and residuals are uncorrelated, either correlation is 0. So you can check their correlation using the core command, and you can see it turns out to be 0. So once you run a regression, so what Stata will do is you can generate residuals using Stata by using predict with reset option, and you can also predict the y-hat values using predict with XP option. Stata will do it for the most recent regression that you've run.